So yeah, we are team Microsoft, the big data team pretty much. And one idea that we had was actually, so we obviously have no water knowledge at all. But one concept that we've heard, and I guess a lot of others have also started on doing, is figuring out a way to identify the small leaks. And one thing, or one approach was actually to set up a sort of a profile per DMA per weekday, or per Saturday, per Sunday, and then see how this actually evolves over time. And then ideally, if it actually increases over time just minimally, then over a couple of months we can identify, okay, there is a high probability that there is actually a small leak. There were some other ideas as well. Amongst others, there was one like anomaly detection. So it actually went as far as actually figuring out whether there's an image similarity between those two user profiles or consumption profiles as well. But yeah, this is our intention.
Yeah, so we thought, oh, we'll take a bit of the data and we'll just see what does the current profile look like, because we kind of got an idea that it kind of went up in the morning, and it went down, went up in the evening, and back down at night. So we could see, obviously, on this. However, we put a really, really simple trend line on just to kind of say, well, does it gradually rise and fall anyway, which it does. So when we potentially continue this research, because we didn't get that far, we thought we need to be really careful about the windowing technique that we use, because there is actually a natural fluctuation. So any kind of like standard values that are being used, it is kind of moving all the time. And then being able to spot a DMA that's slightly different. I mean, I don't know what was going on with this one. It's just a really, really strange one where it was kind of like, it was very, very much off, and there's just tiny, tiny bits coming through.
But then with that one,
oh, sorry.
Whereas with that one, we actually realized that probably it's just registered as a 0 just because there hasn't been any measurements taking place. So once we changed the time period, we actually realized that there's a clear start date for all the measurements taking place.
But yeah, so we basically tried to visualize the data first, because one of the hardest bits we were having trouble with was like, well, what does this actually look like? What does this actually mean to someone who doesn't have much water knowledge? But
so one idea was, okay, so we could see those curves, but then we can't possibly have a look at every single curve for each DMA for each weekday. So how about we sort of compress all the curves in more concise data. So we were thinking of actually calculating just the area under the curve and see whether this area under the curve is progressing or evolving over time. So this is one of our tools, which is called Visual Studio, and in that one there are some tools to make use of a service in Azure, which is called Azure Data Lake Analytics. So what we sometimes call serverless big data. So yeah, this is the data that we started with. What the scripts pretty much look like in the end is, so we had to do a lot of cleaning. I guess everyone had to do that anyways. And then, unfortunately we didn't really get that far yet, or we just got the area calculations per day as well. So this was one stream, and then the other stream that we were thinking of in the typical big data architectures like cold path, real path, or hot path. Cold path meaning, okay, we have the data from the last 10 years. Real path or hot path meaning, okay, how does it look like right now in real time? So we had another, I just lost it actually, another thing going on, which is we started actually ingesting or acting as if the sensor measurements are coming in real time. So we built a data generator. So this is the data that is being generated and sent into an ingest service within Azure. And then it is being visualized in a service called Azure Time Series Insights. So I think this is a very nice visualization to see, okay, to compare the consumption or the flow per DMA over time. So this is the time axis, and we can see the different labels or the different rows, meaning one row per DMA. And the redder it is, the higher the flow in that DMA. And we could actually identify certain anomalies pretty much just by looking at it. So for instance here we can see that gradually it has been growing, that the flow per DMA. and then suddenly it went back to blue. And then we were like, maybe it was actually an identified leak, and then checked with one of the Northumbrian water guys, and turns out, yeah, it was a leak that actually has been fixed. So this is one way where we think like, oh, okay, this is actually a really nice way to do this visually. And ideally, the next step would be to have some triggers or alerts being triggered automatically as soon as we spot a pattern like that one. Okay, now a trigger is being sent off saying there is a probability that there's a leak. Thank you.
Okay, so Bob, Chris, James, Peter from Spatial, we're working on this particular problem. I think we've probably done something quite different to what other people have been presenting. We've got a strong GIS background, right? So we were looking at some of this problem from a spatial perspective, and what we were really interested in is trying to work out how can we join up some of the different scales of the data that we've got to work with. Because you've got your big DMAs that cover a lot of information, and then you've got a lot of detail that's attached to things like point data and line data for pipes and bursts. And how is there a way of joining that up better, or in a different way, where we might get some different data output and then maybe potentially some different insights? So two options that we were spending a lot of time looking at, with quite a bit of help from Dennis actually, trying to say, well, you could look at the DMA and then say, well, what are all the things in the DMA, are there characteristics in there that will give us some insights? And we were kind of a little bit, over 2 days, being a little bit stubborn and going, what about doing it the other way around? What about going from all the different pipe networks and seeing if there's information there that we can like borrow from the DMA and doing it the other way around? So why we were trying to do that? Well, from the GI background, we spent loads of time working with people and systems who've built boundaries and areas and constructed them and used that in their business. And we're like, well, why is that boundary existing? I'm not exactly going to go out and trip over the corner of a DMA, am I? That's not the thing that we work with. But that's GIN element is something that we've also got some of the experience in, and actually going at it from the other way around, I think, is something that is a problem that other people have kind of been looking at anyway. It's part of what they've been looking into. So we looked at it the other way around. So where we've kind of got to is we've probably not necessarily got lots of new data insights, but we've certainly been producing new bits of data output, which might be good things to pass in or feed into, not only extending what we've been looking at, but the kind of the mega problem that we've got to solve, because it's a hard problem. It's been there for a long time, and people haven't solved it yet. So the approach we took was actually to say, well, why don't we just look at some of the network, pick some different measures that we want to use to analyse it, so corrosion, for example, and then why don't we try and partition and build up that network based on those measures? So don't necessarily worry about the boundaries of where the DMAs are up to now. And then when we've spatially done that, let's go and work out that how can we take the leakage information from the DMA level and then proportionally divide it up and drop it onto these new zones that we've created, these new partitions. And then those partitions could be some useful leakage pseudozones, or LPZs, as Peter's called them, So we got stuck loads of times, right, especially yesterday, trying to work out how do you go from these polygons, this linear data and what's in between, and then these bursts keep popping up, and you're looking at these bursts going, why am I looking at bursts when we're talking about leakage? And some people in our team kept telling us that, and we're like, but the data's there, it must be useful, we must be able to use it. And then we were worried about how do we take the space that the DMA covers and divide it up equally and chunk it up. And if you had a continuous coverage, that would work really well. And then we've got all this white space when we would try different techniques to do it, and then we're like, why are we stressing about this white space? Because the things we're interested in, the pipes, and these are linear features. So having tried all these things and failing all the time, we just took it in like 20-minute intervals to keep bugging Andy Hopkins and say, give us the linear data for some of the network, because this will help us. So we did that. So quick intro into the data, and then we'll show it through some of the applications. We've got our DMAs, that's where some of the boundaries are. We've got our network data, and we know where this is. We can chunk it up, we can see which ones are the areas that are most interested, but in the end, this is what we've got. We've got zones of network data. We put it together, if we build those zones using attributes rather than the DMA definition, we get a different picture, and then if we put the leakage data onto that, we get two different views. So two different views of the same data using different techniques.
And I've got 30 odd seconds to do this, so we'll have a go. Oh, I haven't, we've got that. Oh, look, I'll just show you this look on top of. There you go, so we've laid all this data on top, and you can see here we've got some information where we want to be looking in here in the darker zones here, because that's where the leakage is. If I put the bursts on, you can see there's bursts in this area as well, and we've sort of done the data buy different things. If I turn off all these other layers, there you can see that's based on, the colours there are based on the corrosion. If I turn that off and turn on this one, it's based on the size of the pipe and so on and so forth. So we can begin to bring all that together. So very quickly and lastly, thank you very much for the opportunity. We've all found it really, really good. But more importantly, thank you very much for the...
Right, good afternoon everyone. We are Team Wolf. Seems a bit ironic having that up there when there's Richard here, but the rest of the team are pretty much old teams. I think first and foremost, thanks to Northern Water for inviting us along. It's been a great time, and part of the benefit of us being here is the fact that the guys that we're with are all people who've come through our academy, all people who've got anywhere between 6 and 18 months experience coding, never mind actually learning. So they're all very, very new to this. So everything we've done over the last day and a half is quite impressive given the experience of the team. The way we approached this problem was by thinking, well, okay, we've got a lot of data, we need to decide what we're going to import, we need to make sure that the data is usable, we need to look at what it says, and then decided, right, we've got to split the team down. We've got a few different people here, none who've got any experience in GIS, so let's try a few different approaches and see which one works best. So we've got a traditional GIS route, which we've managed to get going amazingly. We've got some prediction in there on a homegrown GIS solution, and we have at the end, I'll tell you more about that when we get to the end. So, first of all, we looked at the data, we imported it into the database. That's quite boring, but we decided that, as the previous team said, everything regarding leaks and bursts was all at the DMA level. So for us to do some really detailed analysis based upon what are the problems, where are the leakages, we wanted to get that linked up on a pipe level. So because that information wasn't there, we did a lot of analysis and we created the link between the leaks and the associated pipes, or what we assume is the associated pipes. This gave us a much richer data set to work from and give us a lot more insight into where the problems were. So part of the team were involved in doing the analysis, and I think it's, probably can't read that, but it came up with some of the expectations of what you would think. These are the particular areas where we're having problems, and that was reflected in the data. In some cases, our data showed that your assumptions weren't reflected in the same way, so that would be interesting to have a bit more of a look at. But really this analysis was then to be used to feed into the prediction model later on. The first step that we took was to put it into the existing GIS systems, so I'll hand over to Richard to have a little bit of a discussion about that.
Okay, so on the GIS application that we used to visually present and correlate the data, we heat mapped the repaired bursts, which you can see the problem areas stand out on there. We then imported the data we had available for surface cover and soil type. And looking at the location we had the data for, it appears that most of the bursts occur in seasonally wet deep clay with roadside pipes, and not far off the main air roads as well. I think that the correlation, the roadside correlation may just be that's where the engineers choose to dig the holes in order to get access to the pipes and repair the pipes. Now, it could be that these areas that we've heat mapped with the pipes are the areas that you focus on with your acoustic equipment in the future to prevent any future leakages. And it should allow for prioritization in repair or replacement of pipes as well.
We did a little bit further analysis as well, looking at the road surfaces and how that works. Very quickly, I didn't see the 30 seconds. Right, we've got 30 seconds to do this. Demo. We also built a GIS system in a day. So this is from scratch. What this will allow us to do is to take your find spot. can overlay animations and a lot more details about the actual data that we've got. So you probably can't see it, but it says 2018 down there. So this spot here is showing what's critical in that area, what's in danger and what's good. Over time, as the years go by, then that will change to more and more critical. The black spot means that there's something that's imminently about to burst. The problem in the first instance was to say, how do we prevent leakage? And really all we focused on is how do we find the leakage. The next step of this model is to actually put in some simulation to say, well, what would happen if we started repairing the leaks at a different rate, and would that reduce the amount of leaks, and would that actually save us money in the long run? So I'll leave it at that because there isn't time for the app, is there? No one shows the app.
We have decided on a winner. We have in fact decided on two winners. But first of all, I'd just like to say what a pleasure it's been for me personally to be in this event. I have to say it's been much better than I expected. I really didn't know what to expect. I've been so impressed with the quality of people in this room. It has been amazing. And for somebody who's spent 30 years fighting and analysing leakage data, trying to understand what it's telling me, it has been a real pleasure just to work with all you guys, because you're all working in different ways, but you've all got amazing skills. We've picked two winners. We've picked an overall winner on the basis of the team who we thought provided an output that is potentially most useful to leakage managers, and our overall winner is PA Consulting. But we also wanted to present an award to the team that we thought came up with something that was the most innovative, and although it wasn't completely developed, it could have the most potential, and that was Dutrix and Clancy Dockery. So